Hello, this is Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on the world of property, supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. And we're live every week on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and our website, propertymatterstv.co.uk. If you're watching on our website, leave us a Google review, and if you're watching on the socials, get involved in the conversation in the comments section below. The email address to get in touch is hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. And we have a podcast version of the show every Monday at 10 a.m. If you'd like to get that, you can get it from the platforms on the other side of the screen. So let's take a look at this week's property news as we go through to the new year. We welcome Joe Joshi and a special guest. Joe, introduce our guest for us.
Yes, good morning and a happy new year. Let's hope 2025 is going to be the one that makes all the difference. But somehow, I don't know. I'm a bit skeptical, but we'll see where it goes. I'd like to introduce Tony. Tony, thank you very much for joining us. Tony has a variety of areas that he's a professional in, covers, apart from him going up and down on his chair at the moment, because he's like, Zebedee's Doodah. So I just want to bring him on board. It's nice to have somebody else on board, give you some opinions, and hopefully Tony will be a regular guest of ours throughout 2025.
Very much looking forward to it, and opinions I do.
Fantastic. Tony, thank you for joining us. He's the founder of Chancery Law and Tax, co-founder of Risk Group, and partner at Plutos Associates. I think I've got that right. Law, tax, insurance, and in finance is his specialist area. So, Tony, just give us a quick insight of how you help your clients before we get underway.
Okay. I think the first thing is making sure that we get on as fellow human beings. It's so important to be able to deal with people, as a fellow traveller through life. Don't get lost in the part. Work out what it is, they're really trying to achieve, and help them get there. Making sure they've got the right legal instruments in place, everything from wills through to partnership agreements. Making sure they have the right insurances, the contingent capital in place. And when it comes to property, having the right funding is the most important thing these days, so you can grow your business in a sustainable fashion without having to seek the dreaded JV investment partner.
So we're talking here really a focus around landlords and buy-to-let and that kind of thing, I'm guessing, Tony. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's landlords, buy-to-let, serviced accommodation, social housing, as well as property development. From homes under the hammer to the rather large-scale developments and everything in between.
And we've heard a lot about buy-to-let in the news, certainly for the last 18 months at the very least, and certainly since some of the regulations changed in 2016. Yeah. Just tell us how you think, in looking back over 2024, because we're just at the end of the year, the 29th of December, we're looking back at 2024. How has that job of a buy-to-let landlord got easier, tougher, or stayed the same?
Okay. Look, tenants and toilets have always been hard work. I gave up being a landlord many years ago. But like in any gold rush, it's much easier selling buckets and spades to the prospectors. Has it become harder? In many ways, yes. You've got a hostile environment, both from government, local authorities, some of the charities allegedly supporting people, have taken quite extreme views. Look, it's never been easy. And by the time you bring in, renters reform, things like Section 24, are there easier ways to earn a living? Yes. But by the same token, if, like a growing number of people in the sector, you can have properties that you'd be happy living in yourself, you'll find being a landlord is that much easier. Do you fit cheap and nasty things or good quality? Well, it's easy. Good quality. They last. Yeah? And more to the point, tenants are less inclined to want to trash them because they feel valued. Yeah? So if you do it right, it's good. If, on the other hand, you're not doing the best of jobs, well, maybe you deserve all the aggravation you get.
And I guess this is something that the government, of both governments of the previous colour and the current colour, have both sort of looked at things and said, you know what, there's votes in looking after these poor tenants because these horrible landlords have been doing all sorts of nasty things, and there is always a small element, I guess, that spoil it for the rest of the landlord community, and the Renters' Rights Bill, as it's now going to be called, the Renters' Reform Bill, as it would have been under the previous government, that's what's scaring current landlords and thinking, what's the point anymore? Like you said at the beginning, it's just too much like hard work.
Yeah, very much so. Right, look, there has to be a balance. Working on the premise of the labourer is worthy of their hire, that applies as much to the landlord as it does to the tenant. A lot of the landlords I deal with have had the same tenants in the same properties for decades. So the renters' rights doesn't really change things, but it does make it more difficult. You've got to truly understand that being a landlord is no longer a hobby. You can't be an accidental landlord anymore. You have to treat it as a professional business. Vet your tenants, vet the properties, maintain them properly, deal with disputes quickly and efficiently, be a member of the major organisations like NRLA and LLAS. Do the job well, and you'll find it rewards everybody well.
And Joe, you get people, you both get clients coming to you and people coming to you for advice for buy-to-let and so on like that. What sort of advice are you giving to people now, Joe, to when they say, should I take out a buy-to-let?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that, Tony. My view is that, look, no matter how long or what happens, the buy-to-let market, the property market per se, is still the best form of investment in most people's eyes. They can touch it, see it, feel it, and however that comes, it's going to come on the basis that they're never going to come away from it. The successive governments have made it difficult. I've always said, and Paul knows, that the property market and the stamp duty is used as a yo-yo for whichever route they want to make it work, because they know that everybody wants to buy at some stage of their life. In terms of the question, Paul, I would say to you that the buy-to-let market, yes, it's becoming more and more professional, but my argument, if there is such a thing, is that those that are actually imposing this on them should really look in the mirror and look at themselves, because half of the councils and housing associations are providing substandard accommodation to the people in the first place, and yet they are the government that is actually now trying to govern the poor. As Tony says, the hobby landlord, as I call them, or accidental landlord, or people that just want to actually be part of that property. They're pushing them out, but actually, when I read in the local press and I listen to the radio, there are now ombudsmen set up for people to complain about the housing associations that they rent properties from in the first place. So we're spending again a lot of public money in trying to tidy up the government's messes. It doesn't matter which colour it was, blue, pink, purple or yellow. So I think that I don't think you will actually take anybody away. They do make it difficult, but I just don't think there is nothing else. And I know Tony's going to talk about that, and I'm really pleased to hear that, because I'm always asked the same question about what else can I do? And the reality of it is there's not a great deal, and none of them are experts. And the experts that they tend to get are normally so in it themselves, they actually find it hard to explain to somebody how they're going to make that money. So people walk away and go, I'll go and buy a flat. I'll go and buy a house. It's easier. At least I know what I'm doing with it. And I think that's where we are with that journey of buy to let. So yes, it is come difficult, Paul. There are a lot more rules and regulations. But I just pick up on one point that Tony said earlier on, and that was about the quality of the fittings and the quality of the property. I've been doing this for 45 years, and no matter what good quality you actually put, the tenants will trash it because their attitude is not theirs. And anything that you don't pay for out of your own pocket, when you put your hand in your pocket and pay for something, you value it far more than somebody else's money. And you can put a poke and pole kitchen in a very nice property, but if the tenant is of a nature that is going to trash it, they're going to trash a poke and pole or a former MFI type of kitchen as well. It doesn't really matter. That's just their mindset and the way they operate, because it's not theirs. It's amazing when somebody actually puts their hand in their pocket and go, right, I'm going to go and pay for that carpet. You'd be shocked how quickly they start to clean it. But when they haven't paid for it, they walk with their muddy boots and go, oh, well, it's the landlord's in it, don't matter.
Yeah.
Far away, Tony.
Yeah, well, I think that very much leads on to the point of pick your tenant, pick your market. Yeah, if you want to have respectful tenants, you've got to move to the professional sector, who by nature tend to be less likely to inflict insanity on property. On the other hand, there's really a market for I won't say poor quality or low quality, but more transient, that would otherwise say use social housing, the old-fashioned council house, as opposed to something more upmarket. Having said that, my sister-in-law and her husband still live in their council house. They never wanted to buy, but they treat it as their own. But people are strange, and you never know who you're going to get at the end of the day.
It definitely seems to us, and it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on this, that since 2016, governments of various persuasions have decided that they don't want the accidental landlord. They don't want people who've come into a bit of money from mum and dad, and they've got 250 grand, and they want to they go and buy something to give them a return. And in this last year, the truth of the matter is, if you took that 250 and you stuck it in a building society or into an ISA or something, you'll get yourself 5%, and you don't have the hassle.
Yeah. Having said that, a lot of the larger landlords started out as accidental ones.
That's an interesting point, isn't it, Joe? At the end of the day, you start off and then you flip onto a second one, and so on. If you're entrepreneurial, the government, could you accuse the government, both of them, of stifling entrepreneurialism with this?
Not just this. Yeah, they've both managed to stifle entrepreneurialism. Politics, the sense of noblesse oblige went out of politics a long time ago. It's now all about popularism, getting yourself into number 10 and staying there. But landlords in particular have had a very difficult time. And who would have thought that a Tory politician, George Osborne, would have ever introduced Section 24?
Yeah, let's just take a look at that for a second. I mean, mortgage interest relief is no longer available, so landlords have seen their profits fall significantly, in particular higher rate taxpayers, and they can no longer receive 40% tax relief on their mortgage payments, so the tax relief is halved. These changes are particularly challenging for landlords who are paying the higher tax. And here's an example on the screen now, how the tax has changed for a landlord paying £500 a month into mortgage interest and earning £1,000 in rent.
Yep.
And it's an interesting set of round figures. So your annual rental income is 12,000. That was the same in 2017 as it is in 2020. The annual interest is still 6,000. Taxable annual income was 6,000 before 2017, but now 12,000. But here's the thing: the tax credit of mortgage interest was nil in 2017. Now it's 20%, so that's 1,200. Your tax bill on the lower rate is still the same, but the tax bill on the higher rate goes from 2,400 to 3,600. So it's a very simple example of the way they're stinging you. And then, of course, you've got stamp duty to add on the back of that if you decide to get out.
Yep. I mean, look, this can be mitigated. If you're a portfolio landlord and you're putting in, say, 20 hours a week, you can incorporate your portfolio, claim the benefits of what's called Section 162 incorporation relief. That means any capital gains is rolled over into the value of the shares of the new limited company as a latent gain, which can itself be mitigated later. And there's no stamp duty on the transfer. You may have to remortgage or have the lender novate the loan into the new limited company. But at that point, you can deduct all of the finance costs. And you have other options open to you, pensions, business life cover, and so on. But I suppose the only positive out of all of the reforms on the tax side is that having a proper business as a limited company ultimately, and I wasn't always of this view, and that's a matter of record, but ultimately is now the best way of doing things. And you've got a separate legal person, so you can, to a degree, separate church and state.
Yeah, it's always important to get advice on these things. So let's just take an example. If somebody comes to you, Tony, and says, right, I've got 250, say 300,000 to look to do something for my retirement. I was thinking about buy-to-let because that's what everybody else was doing. Are you going to take them down that route? Or are you going to make other suggestions? And I suppose to wrap the question up into a simple one is, what other alternatives are there out there?
Well, that's true. Yeah. I suppose, look, it's trying to get inside their head, and understand what it is they're really trying to achieve. Because you have to start where you want to finish. If retirement were tomorrow, what would it look like? Once you've got that point, then you can reverse engineer. I'd help them look at alternatives. But if they were committed, as opposed to needing to be committed to wanting to be in property in the first place, to being a landlord, I'd say, well, look at HMOs, 6 rooms plus. That way you can get commercial valuation. Maybe look at student accommodation. Maybe look at serviced accommodation. So, change the model from single family buy-to-let, to a much more business-facing direction.
And is that something that you help people with? Because obviously, from an individual's point of view, it must be quite scary to think, well, I just wanted to rent to a family who was going to naively live in my house forever and look after it. But so is that something that you help them to move on to and become more effective and professional?
Yeah, very much so. Look, I operate as an advice collective. I've an extensive network. So anybody comes to me once we understand each other, and decided yes, we want to work together on that human basis. Then if they need help on the HMO side, if they need help generally, writing a business plan or anything else they need to have a professional property business, yes, very much so. Help them get on the right track and stay there.
Let's just move on to another topic. Obviously, we're at that pivotal point at the end of a year with 2024 behind us, 2025 coming up. we'll talk about house prices in 2025 in a moment. But how would you sum up property in 2024, Tony?
Yeah. Well, an Englishman's home, you know, is still very much his castle. We have an addiction to property. The market has been difficult, particularly particularly above the 500,000 mark. It's taken months to sell our property. We're moving after being in the same house for 25 years, and it's been a bloody nightmare. Is the market stagnant? At the upper reaches, yes. But there are still plenty of first-time buyers, still plenty of people moving upwards. But it has been overall a very difficult year. And even if you have achieved the sale, it gets even worse once you enter the conveyancing process. What once used to take 6 weeks is now taking on average 4 months.
Yeah, absolutely right. And personal experience in that, as Joe and I have discussed. Joe, would you generally agree with the situation? And why do you think above 500,000 it's so different to what it is at the bottom of the market?
So the general consensus of opinion, we've had an absolute yo-yo. We came into the new year, into 24, with a row and an absolute bombardment of interest rates going up and up and up and up. Then we had, of course, the change of government. Then we had the dreaded budget. And of course, as we noted, that the inflation's gone back up when it came right down to sort of 1.7 to now back up to, I think, 2.3, 2.4. Or that level. So we've had a complete yo-yo of a year in property. However, what is amazing about that is that it has actually stayed kind of steadfast, really. It's not really been beaten up. They haven't really gone back in reverse. I always describe it as the automatic gearbox. 95% of the time we're in drive. A little bit of the time we're in neutral, and very, very rarely do we actually bother to go in the reverse. And we know that in the last 50 years, the market went in reverse probably 5 times, which is a smaller percentage comparison to the whole of the 50-year cycle. So I think the property market is steadfast, and I think that, as Tony says, an Englishman home, or nowadays every international a person that comes here's home is their castle. And in the UK, and they come in boats, and they come in planes, and they come in every other way, but they do end up having a castle in the United Kingdom at some stage or another, whether it's rented, bought, or housing association. It is a fetish. It is something that we always want. We want to own our home. There is something about wherever I lay my hat, that's my home situation. So I think overall it's been steady. I anticipate it will be probably similar going forward in 25. The reason why the £500,000 barrier has been that there's a lot of buy-to-let landlords that actually were perhaps scared out and said, look, got to get out. Most of them had high mortgages and low rents coming in, so they had no choice but to get out. The new ones coming in are now coming in at the new rates, so they can manage themselves going forward. So it's been a year of 2 halves, as they say, really, a good time and a bad time. And the market at that £500,000 and up, well, stamp duty kills some of it. And of course, without the bottom end of the chain, there's very little shift up the top end of the chain, because that's the way the system works.
Tony, looking ahead to 2025, then they're forecasting 2 to 4% growth in prices, which seems quite optimistic. But then we do have this cliff edge with stamp duty, where there is going to be potentially no. It'll drop back to the original 125 limit, floor rather. So there is a suggestion that over Christmas people are going to be frantically trying to get themselves in place so that they can make it by the end of the tax year and these changes. And that's going to give us a very strong start to the year. There was, when this happened before with the stamp duty change, a bit of a falling off the cliff, and there was hardly anything over the back of that. Everybody forward ran it into the first quarter of the year, and then we were really quiet. If I remember the last time that we had one of these situations with stamp duty. So, what's your view? Given that we're probably going to start quite strong, where do you think we're going with all of this?
Rinse and repeat, basically.
Yes. Do you think we're going to? Do you think we're going to get positive growth in prices?
The demand exceeds supply. The basic economic factor, and people will still want to buy. They'll want to upsize, downsize, move to different locations. So there will always be a market. Taking the stamp duty concessions back to where they were is regressive. How to kill a market in one easy lesson. It's probably one of the worst moves the current government has made. Which is.
Do you not feel, Tony, that sorry to butt in? Do you not feel that they will probably rethink that in the spring budget when they realise that that's going to cause and it might be something that they left there, knowing that they will come back with look at us, we're doing a good feel good factor, we're going to be the good people, and we're going to change that. Do you not feel that that's going to happen?
No, sorry. I know this is meant to be apolitical, but I put it this way. Any Chancellor of the Exchequer who puts the portrait of the co-founder of the Communist Party on our office wall seems to tell you everything you need to know. Property is theft. I believe it was said in some communist dogma. No, I mean, for some reason I keep getting posts on anti-social media from Number 10. Trying to put a positive spin on everything. And I haven't seen a single positive comment in support of it. No, I don't see them trying to backpedal. Same with inheritance tax. From 26, businesses are only going to get the first million IHT, free, and then it's 20% on the balance. I mean, it's crazy. Words fail me. And landlords in particular are not treated as businesses. So that will have an effect. It won't just be stamp duty, it won't just be Section 24, but inheritance tax is going to be a contributing factor to what happens to the housing market next week onwards.
Yeah, because we're seeing, aren't we, stories in the press of people rushing to solicitors now to hand over properties to their kids and so on for nothing.
Yeah, not a good thing to do.
No. What should they do?
Okay, well, obviously seek professional advice. Yeah, and I suppose being partially flippant for the moment, is we have our kids, feed them, clothe them, educate them, teach them everything they know. What more do they want?
Shirt off your back, mate.
Well, yeah. Have some fun whilst you still can. Spend it. Indulge. Sex and drugs and rock and roll is much underrated in my book. But I'm of that generation. No, look, there are real problems in giving property to your children, particularly if it's your principal private residence. Firstly, you've got something called a gift with reservation of benefit. So it has to be a complete arm's length gift. So if you're not paying a market rent, it never happened. It still is in your estate. Yes, you can put the property into trust, but that's to shelter it from future hostile creditors or long-term care charging, but has no benefit for inheritance tax. If you're running a business, bring the kids in as shareholders. Yeah, that's a very good way of mitigating IHT. And you can pay them dividends, salaries, and the shirt off your back once again. But giving away your own home to the kids, bearing in mind at that point, because people are strange and families inherently are dysfunctional, you could find yourself out on your ear, because the kids have made a bad marriage, something has gone up their nose, not the right thing to do.
I'm going to give you the ultimate question here. So, if you were in charge of property in the UK, Tony, what 3 things should you do in 2025 to fix the broken system that we largely all agree we have currently? What 3 things are you going to do?
Right. Abolish stamp duty, number 1. Either abolish Section 24 and or recognise property, portfolio landlords as running trading businesses and not living off immoral earnings. And thirdly, which is a more general measure, not just for property, is I'd abolish inheritance tax. You pay tax every step of the way, so why the hell is the state robbing your grave? Because it can.
Okay, then, so the obvious question to follow that up is then, well, where else would you tax for the monies that you've just lost by stopping those taxes?
Well, have you lost that much? It's a relatively small sum in relation to the overall tax take. Obviously, savings, in the Whitehall blob would be a very good thing, along with getting them back in the office as opposed to, was it WFH? Other savings actually would be to raise the threshold for the tax rates. Bring more people into the overall tax net at basic rate rather than higher rates. Yes, you could maybe increase capital gains tax, put it in line with income tax, maybe do something with corporation tax. But by getting rid of stamp duty, IHT, and the like, I think you'd find that the overall tax take will rise. Why? Because people are incentivized to be entrepreneurial. Who was it who said that we're a nation of shopkeepers? Well, let's open more shops then. More shops, more trade, more employment, more customers, more tax. Not difficult, is it?
Joe, I think you'll agree with me. It's been great having Tony and having some additional views on the show this week. Would you like to thank him for his input today?
No, it's good. It's very good. Thank you very much, Tony, for joining us. Not only your insight, but the humour that goes with it is actually a nice addition to our, fairly good standard, odd humour. But it's always nice to have someone else come and join us. Once again, thank you very much. We'd love to have you join us again in the future weeks and so on maybe specific subjects. This today was very much a introduction of the things that you can do, but we often get people asking us questions about specific areas, and you touched on some of those areas today, which people do always ask me personally, what do I do? What's the right direction to do? I often get the same answer, as you rightly say, talk about professional advice, but they actually never listen to it because they just are completely bamboozled with it. So they walk away and go, I'll go and buy myself another house. It's easier. Yeah. And on that note, Happy New Year to everybody.
Indeed. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great fun.
It's been a pleasure, Tony, and thank you for your healthy degree of irreverence. It's been much appreciated. Happy New Year to everybody. We'll see you again next week in 2025.